Gen Zs are not committed, not wanting to work, don't want to go through the grind.
But my question to the other leaders is, what have they done to integrate Gen Zs into your organization? What changed for you? Did you change the way you onboarded people? Did you change the way the reward structure was put in place, like you said, Aditi? Did anything change in any organization to say, okay, now we have a new kind of workforce, let's see how we can make this organization different to integrate them?
All right, so a very good morning, Snigdha and Vibhuti. We are very, very excited to have you join us on our episode 3 of thematic podcast that we do at Arohan. And it's very exciting to talk about a topic that I think seems to be almost like a buzzword, but we obviously don't want to unpack it like a buzzword. We do want to be inviting you to share your experience of how you experience the various generations, and maybe just sort of double click on the demographic dividend that India is really reaping in right now with the Gen Zs who are now coming into the workplace. Now, before I go any further, I'll just spend some time introducing both of you. And I'll do it in alphabetical order, so there is no protocol issue over here, really. Snigdha is a corporate leader who's turned entrepreneur and is founder of Pivot and Power, which is a people and culture transformation firm. She has over 2 decades of experience across leadership, talent learning, and organizational transformation, and has worked with organizations to navigate growth, change, and evolving workforce dynamics. Welcome, Snigdha. We are very excited to have you with us. We're also joined by Vibhuti Gupta today. Vibhuti is the head of rewards at Lenovo and has previously held multiple portfolios like HR partnering, learning and development, and talent management, creating talent solutions for business outcomes. Thank you, Vibhuti, for agreeing to join us for the podcast.
Lovely to be here.
All right, so without much ado, I guess we will quickly dive into our conversation of the workforce, as we say, which is the Gen Z. But really, what I'm very curious to begin understanding from both of you is your experience of the workplace today, considering that it is a multi-generational workplace, and specifically from the advent of the Gen Zs in the workplace. So I'm not necessarily going only the challenge route, but just what does the workplace look like today?
So if I may, Aditi. And before we proceed, I'm going to say this. I smile because never in the history of being introduced in chronological order does S come first. So that was the first time for me. So I totally agree with you. I think the workplace has never been as challenging as it is now. Multi-generational, of course. Half of it is working from home, other half is virtual. A lot of us is global as well. And people who are now in the workforce some of them have joined when we were going through Corona, so they've never even seen how a real workplace looks like. So predominantly, it is quite a tough space right now in the working space, and I don't deny this at all. And I think all the more reason for us to even have this conversation today, because in most of the conversations I have with the leaders, or even while I'm facilitating leadership groups and all, one common theme that constantly comes across is Gen Z in the workforce, right? It just inadvertently picks up, and that is why I was so excited to be here in this place today. I feel I have a slightly different view than most of the people I've spoken to, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation here.
Sure, lovely. I think I share that with you, Snigdha, because I think I have a very different perspective. Considering that I'm working with Gen Zs, one of my 2 children is a Gen Z, so I think I'm almost like an outlier in most of the groups that we tend to have a conversation with. Vibhuti, I know you wanted to add on to it.
Yes, I think never before have we seen so many generations working together. That's the biggest shift that I would say we are experiencing. And the interesting part is that for each of the generation, work means different things, right? And that is why it creates those challenges as well as those opportunities in how we as HR leaders can coach, optimize, and get the maximum from what matters to each person who's at a different life stage. So it's both interesting as well as challenging, is what I say.
Hmm. I think that's a very interesting thing that you say in terms of work means different things to different generations. And I'm very uh, interested in understanding from both of you as to how does that really translate and how does it manifest really at the workplace?
I think maybe from my side, we've seen, and I mean, I'm a millennial, so I've grown up to know that there is a corporate environment that leads, and you work hard, you progress, if not quickly, but slowly and steadily, and you get the rewards that out there are waiting for you, or you've seen someone do it, right? The people who are, of course, of the elder generation to mine have been more stable, much more loyal. I mean, for example, they might not even have changed organizations because they're so true and so loyal to their work and their job. I mean, job has been, or work has been, a source of dignity for many of them, and including maybe for me too. But the younger generation looks at it quite differently. They don't see it as a lifelong contract, number one. Forget the organization. They don't even see working as something that they, possibly aspire to do for lifelong, right? They've made their fire plans and retirement plans for, 30s and 35s and whatnot, right? So I think that contract of what people would have with investing in an organization is becoming more transactional over generations, is what I see it to be, right? Now, while that contract is becoming transactional, the expectations are becoming manifold, right, from the workplace. What used to satisfy certain people in terms of a regular salary and a regular just the good to haves do not satisfy the younger generation, because they're always looking for what's in it, a for me, and secondly, how can I see the rewards that you're promising to me, not as something that will happen if I be here, if I stay here, or if I slog here, but something that I need to see here and now. So that, in my mind, is the most fundamental shift that has happened in what I feel work means to different people today.
Snigdha, anything that you have to add on to that?
Yes, I 100% agree with Vibhuti. People take work differently than what they used to be. I see a lot of Gen X who are still in the workforce and millennials. They themselves are very different, but Gen Z I've seen is a much bigger gap. So for all, and this is all very experiential, Aditi, that I have seen in my own workspace. I've seen that most of the Gen X are now in a space where they're like either they are parents to children who need their time and energy. They're also sometimes caregivers and both. So for them, it is predominantly for a lot of them who are not, trying to just really make it big and are not highly ambitious. For them, it is a job that is needed to make ends meet. And a lot of energy goes into managing home and children and parents and job at the same time, which is very different from what a Gen Z is looking for, who have pretty much been brought up with a whole lot of things served to them on a platter by their parents because parents could afford to give it. So for them to say everything in my life will revolve around a job is not true, and ideally it should not even be. I think the challenge is predominantly arising from the fact that because Gen X and millennials have gone through the grind, they have seen the results. Somehow the mindset says, if I have gone through it, why are they not going through it? I don't think it is so much about a problem with them not doing something. It is, I think somewhere we also feel that, did we miss out on it? I wish I could do it as well, right? It's not like I'm very proud of slogging 14 hours a day for a lifetime, and I have done that, and I'm not very proud of it, right? I just did it because of some misplaced loyalty and need to prove myself and constantly be there. And I'm very proud of the Gen Zs today who think they can say a no and don't feel guilty about saying no. I wish I said more of it. I wish I had pushed back a little more, right? I'm not also saying it's always the right thing, but I think that shift is very predominant right now in the generations. So with a generation who's eager to learn and grow and ambitious and has exposure and all, is dealing with the generation who is trying to balance their life and personal stuff and workspace and all, and hoping both of them will just absolutely fit into each other's space. I think that itself is not a very sensible ask to have.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think that is what is the ask, really.
Yeah.
And I find it very difficult to believe that we are expecting everybody to just stop their way of being and stop their way of thinking and suddenly change for somebody else. So.
I think there are a couple of dichotomies that I pick up as I look around. One of the things is I think the parents of the Gen Zs who are also in the workforce, as you rightly pointed out, Snigdha, are almost different. I mean, look, we have to take the responsibility for how we brought up this generation, number one. So I think even when we sort of put out there saying that the parents provided for everything, I think that also came from a certain conditioning to say, look, we didn't have it easy and we want to make sure that you have at least the basics taken care of. We've taught them to say no. We've taught them to ask questions. We've taught them to challenge. Now, it's all okay at home, but when we come into the workplace, it's not okay if my team member does that while they come from the same generation. So I think there is this really interesting dichotomy that I keep observing, and I'm like, we can't absolve ourselves of the responsibility of doing what we did, right? And for whatever reasons, I mean, obviously the world has moved, a lot has shifted over the years. So I'm not sort of putting it as a responsibility or blame for any of the generations. That said, there is a certain responsibility that we have to take. I also see that the educational system has also evolved over these past years. Like when I went to school, it was very different to, what happened with the millennials. I think it started to shift, Vibhuti, by your time. And then by the time the Gen Zs were in school, it was dramatically different, really, is what I would think. And I was listening to this really, really cool video by Simon Sinek when he's talking about the challenge that the managers have with Gen Zs in the workplace. And he said, well, when we ran races in school, there was always only a first, second, third, and that was it. And then came a time when kids ran the race in school, everybody got a prize for participation. So now when they come into the place of work and the way our organizations are structured, we are still asking people to be first, second, third for the so-called rewards / recognition. But they're demanding a participation prize, right? So I think it's a very interesting social dynamic that has evolved. And this is not true just of our country. Of course, our country has faced it because larger population and so on and so forth. But this is really a global phenomenon. So I think it's a very interesting thing to consider while there are these brushing remarks a lot of managers are making in terms of Gen Zs are not committed, not wanting to work, don't want to go through the grind. But I suppose there is something that we all as people at the hem of affairs in organizations also need to take care of. And that's my 2 bits to it. So please build on whatever that emerges for you from here.
No, Vibhuti, if I may. So I was just reflecting on what you said, Aditi. My personal experience with Gen Zs has been really good. And why I say that is because I think personally as a leader, I've always felt you invest in people and it pays off. And I've spent an inordinate amount of time trying to train my teams or coach them and all. Sometimes to my own burning out, which again, like I said, is a certain way of being. But at the same time, I realize if you challenge them, if you make them learn, if you allow them to make mistakes and grow and allow them to do the things that they want to do their way, rather than forcing them to follow a certain path because it's worked historically, I think that goes a long way. I have never come across somebody who says, I don't want to learn. Just tell me what to do and I will do it for you. That's not how Gen Zs operate. But if we are sitting on top of them and asking them to behave exactly in the same manner that all the other generations have, doing a certain thing because this is the way it's been done, and expect them to follow that path, I don't see how that works. Because you've given them access to so many things right now, like you said, right? They've been bought in a certain manner, they've been allowed to question, they have access to information like never before. They don't have to do anything. I mean, what we've spent hours doing, they can do it with a click of a button thanks to AI. So why are we asking them to suffer going through certain kind of work because we have been historically doing it, and then also get upset because they're not excited about it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I wouldn't do that either, right? So
Yeah.
that's how I see it. I'm also not saying that it's all hunky dory, to be honest, right? I have seen some amount of laziness. I have seen some amount of, why should I do this? And, refusal to follow rules to a great extent. But then where there is never, so it is never black and white. It's never
Yeah.
black and white. It's like saying every other generation before them was perfect. It wasn't. So they have their own challenges. Again, my thing is that while we keep talking about what are Gen Zs doing, how are they working in a workspace and all, but my question to the other leaders is, what have they done to integrate Gen Zs into your organization? What changed for you? Did you change the way you onboarded people? Did you change the way the reward structure was put in place, like you said, Aditi? Did anything change in any organization to say, okay, now we have a new kind of workforce, let's see how we can make this organization different to integrate them? So we want to operate the same way. We also want the Gen Zs to operate the same way, and then we keep complaining when they don't want to. I think that predominantly sums it for me in my head. And I have seen it work differently where you make a little bit of effort. It may not be 100% thing, but it's definitely better than saying they don't do anything, or they're whatever the new words are coming across for them about not wanting to work.
Yeah. Two things that I'm picking up, Snigdha, from what you're saying. One is the integration into the workplace, or how the organization is responding to the new workforce and their expectations. And the second piece is the rewards piece. So I'm going to very quickly go to Vibhuti. I know rewards is something that's very, very close to your heart. That's what you do. How about you expound on it? Do you think there's a difference in the generation saying, okay, we want rewards and we don't want rewards? What's your take on it?
I think it's a rewards is a core psychological need. I don't think that changes by generation. The medium and the way the reward is being done possibly is what is getting changed, right? So I mean, picking on to what Snigdha is saying, that even I am, for example, seen wonderful people who are Gen Zs and who've been able to pick up. I think the learning curve for them is far better than I see it for any other person, right? Even the most specialized person that I see who's not a Gen Z would take up some time, but I would think that the Gen Zs would pick up something really, really quickly, right? So I think to Snigdha, completely agree in what you're saying, that it's not hunky dory also at some points, but the idea is to channelize their work in the way that makes sense for the organization, right? I'll give you an example of what we do at Lenovo. So we, a few years back, figured out that, we're becoming so multi-generational and all. And we created this program called a Feed Forward program, which is actually the reverse mentoring program that, we can call it in a general parlance. And we invite nominations from people who are Gen Z and ask them what they can teach to their leaders. And then there are some conversations or some set of conversations that are set up, and a senior leader is learning from somebody that is part of their team, and they may not have had access to, because obviously they're dealing with some really different level stuff. But that provides them an opportunity to understand not just the learning part in terms of what they're teaching, but also the perspective, right? We are a consumer organization in the sense that we deal with products that reaches to consumers. So it's important for our leaders to understand the way that the consumer is evolving today, right? And no better way to do it than with learning from your own people, right? We can go into surveys, and of course we do that, right? But the whole understanding of where the psychology is going is best done, from the people that we have internally. So that is done. Now, in terms of rewards, I think while the what of rewards is like I mentioned remaining the same, one of the most important things that I see Gen Zs craving for is feedback loops. They don't want a once in a year conversation. They like that's too late, right? I mean, you can't just say that, okay, this is what you did, and now this is the reward that I'm getting, right? I should have been notified of where I'm not going well or where I am going well much before. I don't think the conversation that I've observed is on the quantum of what they receive, but how transparent we are, right? Pay equity is becoming such a norm. I mean, today AI, Glassdoors, etc., have provide you, information on salaries like no other thing. I mean, that's a different matter. That they are obviously not to be trusted because, and I say this as a rewards professional. But yeah, one can't stop the curiosity of people to be wanting to know what is it that they could ideally be paid, right? So the expectations on transparency, on equity, are greatly increasing from this workforce. The other thing is that they don't just look rewards from a perspective of cash, unlike possibly, what we have been used to. For them, rewards is a whole bouquet of, how they can contribute, how they can feel while being employed in an organization. And that is why, things like, workplace flexibility tops the chart for them, right? So that becomes a part of what they would negotiate when they are, coming or joining an organization. That more than the cash is like, okay, we can take like a 90% than what we had expectation on, but we don't want to compromise on, some of these items. That flexibility becomes one of the important levers for them. Then flexibility in terms of rewards becomes important to them. So I'll give you an example. We have our standard, insurance coverages for that we offer to all our employees. And for the longest time, we've been having a standalone design saying that the employee and their immediate family is covered in the base insurance that we give, which is the standard design in the market. And recently, we're coming across with queries when we're inducting the Gen Zs, and they're coming up to saying that, okay, but I don't have a family, and I don't even need that much of a cover that you're giving me because I'm young and healthy. Can I use some of this amount that you're actually keeping for my benefit, assuming that I would have had a family, into something that is more valuable for me, like a gym membership? Like something else, right? And to be honest, that's that just opened our eyes into how expectations are evolving to benefit what's in it for me and not just basis, what the organization has been providing. So that's a wake up call for us, and we're going to work on that. So that's basically how I am seeing the rewards expectations evolve.
Yeah. No, and I was just sort of preparing for today's talk. And, one of the things that came to my mind very strongly was the work done by Daniel Pink on what truly motivates people. And their research says that in spite of generations, and obviously they're not really talking generation specifically, but what they're saying is that in any cognitive work, once the basics are taken care of, carrot and stick stops to motivate people. And that is generation agnostic, really. So just because we condition, and I think Snigdha, you alluded to it, just because we condition to think in a particular way, we assume that that's the right way or that's the only way, which is obviously getting challenged now more and more because it may not be. There are different ways to look at things. But that said, there are different things that motivate people. And if I go back to what Daniel Pink's work says, is that there are three things that motivate people, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if I look at Gen Z, specifically in the Gen Z context, I would think it's exactly the same thing. They're all looking for autonomy. Do they have a free hand to be able to do their work, how they wish to do it, when they wish to do it, and from where they wish to do it? So I think autonomy is kind of broader based for them than it was possibly for the other lot. Mastery, are they really getting to learn anything new? Are they really being able to develop themselves or become better versions of themselves is what keeps them motivated. And of course, purpose. I think they are asking the purpose question a lot more in a lot more pronounced way than anybody ever has. And I often say this, though self-deprecating, but I think I only started to ask purpose way later in my career, right? When I have to quit my job, what's the purpose of my life? Up until then, I was not even thinking purpose, right? So I think it's what I did was probably too little, too late. I just wish I always knew what the purpose was, or whatever the work that I was doing every day. How was it contributing to something bigger? But we almost missed the picture on that, and then we're sitting and questioning, "Oh, why am I not really excited to get out of bed and go to work today?" Which I think is in their minds a lot clearer. So I think that again, even things like these really rests, brings in the responsibility more on the organization and the leaders, in terms of how they're interacting with this generation. And as we say, right, we have to meet them where they are. They're not going to meet us where we are. So how are we really working towards meeting them where we are is an interesting space for us to explore as well. I think conditioning again, right? We were never applauded, hence why should we say? Like there are things that people tell me, oh, if I was really going to appreciate them every day, then are they not going to sit on my head and think that, they've arrived in life? And I'm like, how does it matter? Like, as long as you're being able to tap into what they have to offer. And I think that's my thing. I think I'm almost thinking that we're not tapping into what they have to offer.
Yeah.
We're just sort of almost missing the bus because we're completely, for want of a better word, biased against the way that they want to work. And, that bias is a heavy word over here, but I do think that it is showing up in a multitude of ways, such that we're not really putting in the effort to meet them where they are. And I love, Vibhuti, what you talked about, the reverse mentoring. I've heard a lot about that from other organizations as well. And I think that's so meaningful, because if we don't understand them, we better put in the effort to understand them, because if we are not understanding them, they're not going to understand us, and then it becomes a quid pro quo, for whatever it's worth. But and that's not really going to go any further. That also sort of brings me to the fact that there's probably a trend, not just an organization level. I think there's a trend also across the academic background that we're bringing them up to, right? So I think the year before last, there was this very interesting research that got published, and this was specifically India, which said that when they actually saw the number of students who were coming out of colleges, 75% of them were considered unemployable by organizations. And really, I think that opens up a huge space for education, academia, and corporates to really have that partnership to say, how are we really, one, making these people ready to come into the organizations? Of course, given the new language, given the new, sort of the way they want to work, kind of a situation. And also at the same time work with our leaders to say how they can make it worthwhile for these people. So I think there's a responsibility on all stakeholders in the society, but I do think that at some level we're just sort of not reading as well into it as I think we should. Because I would be very worried if somebody said that 75% of the people are not employable. And then I'm also listening to Ajay Banga, who's heading the World Bank, talk about the billions of people who will be unemployed by 2050. I think that's, again, to your point, Snigdha, we don't know what the future holds. I do, however, think that there's an opportunity for us to really tap into over there. So anything that you have to sort of share on that, and your experience, or just what your, Vibhuti, since you're with Lenovo, so what is it that you think that the organization can do building from here?
So, I mean, firstly, Gen Zs, or I would say the young people, are a talent pool for us. It's been more important than ever for us to cultivate young talent, and we have metrics where leaders are held accountable to the kind of penetration that we are building into our team. So it's the conversation on whether this should be done is out. The question is now on how should we make this the best value for them and for us. And I think, I mean, a few things that Aditi is a reality. I think, academia has not. I wouldn't even, say academia. I think the skills in the workplace are changing so quickly that it is not, being able to translate into academia in the same speed, right? I mean, academia takes some times to, figure out what's needed, then devise the calendar, and then it's a 4-year program. They are inputting or they are accepting people based on what mattered 4 years before. But at the end of the 4 years, the world has changed, right? So, I mean, I would say the answer to this lies in a collaboration between academia and organizations, because we clearly see the talent pool that they have, and they clearly see the learning that we can provide. So, and we have programs that we keep on doing, whether it is direct partnerships with some colleges, or for example, creating internship programs. Right now, the government is mandating internships, mandatory internships, because they want to bridge that skill gap that we're observing, and so we are very much looking forward to building that. And to do that, suddenly the proportion of Gen Zs is increasing, and so are, having our program. So we're having these conversations on, how do we handle multiple aspects for them, their L&D, their rewards, etc., because that is what is going to be the future, from this standpoint. And yeah, so pretty much that's a part of workforce planning, is what I want to say. It's
Yeah.
no longer a standalone conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, I do agree with Vibhuti. We do have to see how the organizations are making sure that they do integrate. I'm also not completely averse or not completely blind to the fact that there are challenges in that generation, right? While I've been very gung-ho about what is great about them, but the reality is that they also need to work on some things. I feel they do lack a little bit of patience, because that need for instant gratification is very, very high, given that they have come to a certain thing. So the need for something to be fixed immediately, for a feedback to be immediately heard, for a response to be immediately done, is very high. And that's not how organization works. And typically not large organizations where things and process take some time.
Yeah.
They do not have a very long-term perspective. So whatever the organizations decide to do for them and all, it has to be something that is closer to home at that point of time, right? So giving them very long-term vision and views which they don't necessarily align with, or they don't feel the need to stick around with, may not be the best solution at this point of time, right? I think the one thing that they don't do very well right now is they get stressed very quickly. There's this whole concept of, I'm very stressed, I can't do this. This is asking for too much. And somewhere that becomes a little bit of deterrent when the whole, even when I say that the organizations need to do something for them, or even when I say the leaders need to be with them and make them learn and all. But if their receptivity to some of this is very, very low, then it becomes challenging for both the sides to do. So somewhere, finding the right balance, and I'm not sure if I have the exact answer for that. But the answer somewhere lies in finding the right balance as to how much are we willing to give and how much do they also need to step up a little bit. So instead of looking at it all in a very black and white manner, or only being critical, or only being very gung-ho about who they are, I think what will really make a difference in then understand that they are faster, they are like, more connected, they are more transparent and all of that. But their what do you call, their entitlement is also coming from some amount of higher expectations, and they don't want to accept old rules because they have seen their parents go through it. They've seen how it has worked out for them. So where do we draw a line, or where do we go in and say, okay, only this much is something that we will accept, the other 4 steps you will take, I will take 2, you also take 2. So that is where I think the struggle constantly arises, and it could be different for different organizations. Personally, the sense of purpose that you spoke about, Aditi, I think that goes a long way for any generation. So if we can build a little bit more on that, and then if they see what really comes out of the work that they do. My worry is when I see organization, I see leaders are very order giving kinds, right? They will tell you what to do. They may also tell you how to do it, but why they should do something and what is the larger purpose and what is the result, that they keep for themselves. They're like, I am leader, I know, I'm telling you do this to do it. It doesn't work like that. And then when something has really gone well, where does that come into picture and say, listen, you did that small thing which has resulted in such a big success. So when they're not able to see what is coming out of their work, than acknowledgement, far more important than rewards, far more important than anything else, because their sense of purpose is not being met, which is so close to them. This is how I see it. I'm not negating Vibhuti at all, that Vibhuti, that there should not be awards and acknowledgement. Of course, they're all true. But the higher sense of why I'm doing here and my presence makes a difference. I think that is something we really need to build on. And not only for Gen Zs, I think all humans operate like that. I want to see that I make a difference. I want to feel acknowledged. I want to feel that I'm a part of a larger ecosystem. And my being there or not being there does make a difference. If we are going to treat everybody the same and say whether you're here today or you leave tomorrow and it's all the same, then that's how they are going to be.
Yeah. Maybe I want to just add to something that Snigdha is saying, that and this is my personal interpretation of why we're seeing some of these behavior patterns that we're seeing, in the sense of them um, being okay to say no to many more things that we would have not said no. I mean, it's two reasons perhaps. One is they don't believe in performative work. I mean, everything needs to be done with a purpose, not just to show that you're working, right? So I think that's very, very ingrained in them. And I think the second and the biggest reason is that today Gen Zs have a community. And what I mean by that is, when we grew up and we had, let's say, challenges at our workplace, the maximum I could speak to is a friend, right? About what I'm not liking, what is not going well. Today, Gen Zs take that up on social media. They portray what they're not liking. They consume content on social media, and so the visibility of dissent, as I would say it, is bigger than ever before in the minds of Gen Zs, right? They're saying that, okay, I saw somebody on Insta reacting this way to a similar situation, so it's cool for me to do it too, right? So I think that is where their mindset is, and I mean, I don't blame them. That's the situation that they're growing up in social media, where everything feels personal, everything feels like it's right happening to you, right? But I think that's where we need to coach them, to show them the bigger picture, that, I mean, social media is true, it is true, but it's also just projecting what you want to project there. It may not be reflecting the actual reality of what's actually happening.
So recently, somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn asking for a job, and that's nothing new. I have people reaching out a lot of times. And I understood that maybe a few years back, where I was actually in a role where I could probably hire for my organization, or I could do something. Now they reach out without even looking at my profile. Is it something I'm even doing? They'll just send a note. Hi, how are you? How was your day? And this is literally like a 2 weeks back conversation. How was your day? How was office? And I'm like, who is this person? I don't know why they're doing this small talk, chatting with me on LinkedIn. For me, I'm very clear. LinkedIn is a professional site, right? It's not a Facebook. And it went on till I asked him, what can I help you with? And they said, yes, I need a job. And I'm like, what is strange way, right? So the language was the SMS language. I'm sorry, it really gets my goat, in a professional space. And I told that gentleman, I usually don't do that. I usually tell them, I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to help you. But in that day, I said, what is it? I said, if I were looking for a job, let me give you unsolicited advice. Please give me your introduction first. Reach out. Why are you asking me? Attach your profile. I mean, are you really expecting me to do small talk with a stranger I don't know? And then your expectation is, I will look up your profile. Then I will think what is the best fit for you. And I reach out to somebody with what? Right? There's nothing concrete for me to even take and say, let me send this to somebody. And the gentleman got mighty offended and said, and very sarcastic to me, saying that, if you don't want to help, that's okay. But I was just trying to, have a conversation so that we could reach that place. And here is my profile. I'm like, wow. So that was one. The other, somebody I met at an event, and then she told me her daughter's looking for a job in the HR space. I thought, okay, I can help. What do you want me to do? So she sent a nice resume and stuff. Now I'm the one trying to find her jobs. I send her messages and I tell her, okay, this is available, that is available, and stuff like that. And then I realized the response from her side is almost nil. Thank you, with the exception of thank you, which comes after 8 hours. She's not bothered to check with me if there is something else. She's not bothered to update me on all the roles that I sent to her. And I'm like, if you are that disinterested or careless, in making your own career, then I'm not going to go out of my way beyond what I already have, right? And I have quite a few of my friends and known people who now have their children who've worked somewhere, studied abroad, done a little bit of work, and have come back home because they're in between jobs. And they seem to be no hurry to find a job, and they're sitting because parents are still taking care of them. And in your late 20s, I don't think I'd appreciate that at all whatsoever, right? Parents have spent so much money on educating you, giving you all the benefits. You've gone abroad and studied, which is half of the generation in India wanting to do today. All of that is done. And then here you are back sitting at your parents' home thinking what I want to do with my life. This doesn't work. And, all those kind of things. And parents are like, when the hell are they going to get out of my house? I'm sorry for the language, but that's the other side of it. So it's really, either I want it all or I'm just going to sit and wait for the perfect life to happen to me. I don't think that works.
Yeah.
So it is.
Yeah.
So I think my one piece of advice for Gen Zs definitely would be, please take a charge, charge of your own life. Nobody's going to come and do it for you. You have to suck it up a little bit. If things are not going your way, please either make it better or spend time to learn why are they a certain way, rather than just quitting and saying, I will wait for the next best thing to happen to me on its own, which is never going to be. So that's my 2 bits on that side, Aditi.
Deeply resonates, Snigdha. Go ahead, Vibhuti.
No, absolutely. I think you put it out as best way as it could be, Snigdha. And one of the piece of advice that I notice is that the whole thing that Gen Zs are now making us see things that we perhaps have not seen earlier, which is both good and bad, right? It's good because maybe we were taking some things for granted that we hadn't opened our eyes to. And so the Gen Zs are questioning it, which is all good. But the bad is like what Snigdha you're saying, they're taking it as a disgruntlement and doing nothing about it, right? Or perhaps complaining about it, which leads to that perception of them at the workplace that we are, all trying to help around. So I think my one piece of advice would be that look, your instinct about what's not wrong is often right? But your work doesn't stop at just identifying that, right? Your work is also to identify what is it that could become better, to articulate it into a problem. Okay, this is why this is happening. This is what could be improved, and this is what will become better. So, just going a step further than just identifying a problem and being unhappy with it, with actually showing what can be done about it is what my advice would be.
I agree. I think if I were to just sort of build on what both of you said, and I'll go right at the beginning as well of our conversation, words like stress, words like burnout that keep getting thrown around with much abandon, I think now, not understanding that these are serious things, right? Stress is actually a serious thing. But we've just sort of brought it so much into our lingo now that it's okay to say it every single time and throw it in people's faces. And I think one has to be very conscious about how it's being used and when it's being used. And you're right, Snigdha, I do agree that there are pockets where it is getting used to squiggle out of things as well. Which is not the best way to deal with it. If one does want to be seen as a professional, so you can't try to get out of things by using these words and then say, oh, the world is against me kind of a thing, right? Because that just doesn't sit well. Interestingly, even the Gallup report in 2022 said that the Gen Zs has the highest percentage of disengaged employees. Right? I mean, no other generation has that many disengaged, or disengaged really in their terms is the not engaged. So the not engaged are people who just show up to work, do their thing and go back home. And then in the same breath, we are talking about, them sort of wanting to look for purpose, looking out for organizations that are talking about ethics and sustainability and so on and so forth. So I think, again, there seems to be a paradox. Whatever people are doing, howsoever they're showing up, there has to be a certain sense of responsibility because there is an impression that gets created. When I meet some of the new people, something as simple, which in my mind can be inane, but I have to appreciate where they come from, is why am I expected to dress up in a particular way? Or why must I show up to work at 9 o'clock in the morning when I actually do my work and I can do it? I'm nocturnal, I can do it at night. These are real things for these people. right? And I think we're just not, at some levels, we're not being able to find a way to bring this together. So I think I don't think it'll ever be a perfect world. That said, there is a responsibility both on the Gen Zs as they come into the workplace. There is a responsibility on the organizations, and see where this takes us really, because there is no cookie cutter approach. There is no template, unfortunately, or a playbook that we could all follow. Uh, but I do completely agree with you that a lot of things are getting thrown around, and we're almost hiding under those things, which is possibly where some of the complexity coming is also coming in, and we do succumb to painting everybody with the same brush, which is also, I think, a fault, right? So if there's a Gen Z who's really doing well and is showing up differently, then we can't in their presence keep saying, oh, Gen Zs don't work, or they're not loyal, or they're just they're just very dismissive about, or they're very lax. So I think that sensibility has to come from all parties really in that space, so that it doesn't become transactional, Vibhuti, as you said, right? The contracting, when does it move from transactional to really saying that we're all vested in this contract? But then you see they're generally not vested. I mean, again, that's a generalized statement that I'm making, but they're also sort of, I think they're almost insulating themselves from the risks of being in a very strong relationship, is somehow I feel. And I think that insulation is also coming from just how they're seeing the world move. So that's how I'm observing it. And I subscribe to the advice that you're giving. So while we've given advice to the Gen Zs, any last bit of advice that you have for the leaders as well, because we all have to make it work eventually.
Okay, so I think I have a similar advice that I have for the Gen Zs. I'm going to flip it on its head. So if the Gen Z is looking for purpose, give them the purpose. Don't just tell them what to do, tell them why. But at the same breath, I'm also going to, go back and tell the Gen Zs, if you're not finding purpose, ask for it. Why does everything have to be served on a plate to you? If you have a concern, speak about it, and speak about it in the right manner. And then my request to the leaders would be, then please don't, like you said, brush them or paint them all with the same brush. Please don't minimize their feelings or belittle them just because you don't understand them. I think the real balance will come from both parties having candid conversations with a lot of why rather than how and what. That's a very shallow way of doing things. Like to your point, Aditi, you said that why should they come in at 9 o'clock? So rather than telling them why they need to come in 9 o'clock, sorry, that they need to come in at 1 o'clock, tell them why that matters. Because I don't know if they understand the organizational challenges of seat utilization or the building or the fact that they have certain amount of time that they can put, and they're not going to run all utilities because you work better at a certain time. So there are real challenges. We are running a business, we're not running a charity. But instead of saying that this is the real business reality, this is how I want you to think about it, we go and tell them this is how it is.
Yeah.
And nobody appreciates this is how it is, not today's generation for sure. Like we didn't appreciate being told all the time just because I said so by our parents or bosses, but we were a little bit more acceptable of that. Now that they're not acceptable, we have a problem with that. So my two bits to both sides is be a little bit more honest, be a little bit more patient with each other, and start looking at the larger picture instead of focusing on every small thing and making it like a big issue in its whole. It's a 35, 40 years career. Every small conversation of he said, she said, I did do it. You can't live like this. It's going to be beyond exhausting to pick up everything. One promotion that came few months late, one reward that didn't come or come in a larger span of 40 years doesn't make any difference. I mean, who remembers? So focus on the larger picture, be a little bit more open about what's working, and I think a little bit of vulnerability from our leadership will go a long way rather than a lot of dictatorship ways of being. So that's my thought on it, Aditi.
Very astute. Thank you. Vibhuti, how about you? Your advice.
I think, beyond what Snigdha's mentioned, patience, vulnerability, I think the other one would be um, to help them, to give them autonomy, as much as possible, because one of the things that I've noticed is that the most of the questions that they've been asking, right, they will get silenced once they see how it's like to be on the other side, right? So, give them shadow exposures, give them, roles that really make them see the other side, so that they don't take it into a way that, oh, we're being asked to do it, or there's some other reason that we don't understand. But they're smart people. They're really, really smart people. They can uncover the reason themselves once we put them on those spots. So giving them those opportunities is, what I would say from my side.
I think we could just as we do reverse mentoring, I think we should also do a job rotation of putting them into their leader seats. Go live the life of your leader for one day. You that's how you appreciate it. And I think they're also, because they've all learned by doing largely. Unless we really put them into those spots, they don't appreciate the challenges, and then they'll just turn around and say, "Oh my God, I didn't know that you have to go through this as well."
Yeah.
So that mutual appreciation, I think, is really, really important. Well, I guess we're sort of at the top of the hour in terms of the time that we'd committed for this podcast, and I really appreciate the candor that both of you brought into this conversation. I don't want to make it sound simple or easy to say we'll all have a solution tomorrow morning, because we will not. After all, we're talking about people, and it takes a lot when we're working with people and enabling them to just become the best versions of themselves in service of something larger, which I think which every organization is really gunning for. So thank you so much. And any last concluding words from both of you would be lovely.
I think from my side, it's just that every generation feels that the next generation is tough, but that's the norm of the world, right, since we began. So, given that we have so many resources for discussing, for interpreting, is wonderful, but ultimately it's just to be done.
Yeah, I agree.
Vibhuti, it's like you took the words right out of my mouth. Like Gen Z has all these platforms. I think we are also inordinately leaning towards talking about Gen Zs, which I don't think has ever happened earlier. Right? We don't talk so much about millennials or Gen Xs, and like Vibhuti said, every generation has felt some similar things about the next one, and this one's no big difference. I just think this has now become a much bigger concern that it typically has been all this while. Again, I think there's work that needs to be done by everybody, keeping an open mind, and I don't think anything is so insurmountable that we make it like such a big thing. Sometimes we also not need to give so much importance to a certain thing for it to die down on its own. So let's not water this belief that there is something instinctively wrong with this group, but water the belief that we can all work together at some level. So that's how I look at it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Snigdha, Vibhuti. It's been such a pleasure to have you both join us. And we look forward to more conversations in the times to come. Let's see what the other themes get thrown at us in our way as we go along and we continue to work with people. So thank you once again for joining us today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure being here, and thank you for inviting. Thanks for
my pleasure.
Lovely meeting you.
Lovely
All
meeting
right.
you.
Bye.